Most people think a heart attack is obvious: severe chest pain, someone collapsing, a dramatic moment you can't miss. But that's not how it usually happens. In many cases, it starts quietly, subtle enough to ignore, easy enough to misinterpret, and that's exactly why it becomes dangerous, because when there's no medical training, no clear signal, the brain looks for simpler explanations. Maybe it's just indigestion. Maybe I'm just tired. Maybe it'll pass. So people wait, they sit down, they try to relax. They delay action not because they don't care, but because they're not sure. And that uncertainty is where time is lost, because a heart attack isn't defined by how intense the pain is. It's defined by what's happening underneath. A restriction of blood flow to the heart. A process that can escalate while the symptoms still feel manageable, and that creates a dangerous mismatch. The situation is serious but the signal doesn't feel urgent enough. So let's break that pattern. Most people are taught to look for one thing: chest pain, but the body rarely communicates in a single signal. Instead, it creates a pattern. A combination of sensations that, when seen together, start to tell a different story. There's discomfort in the chest but not always sharp pain. It can feel like pressure, tightness, fullness, something that doesn't quite feel right. Then there's radiation. That discomfort doesn't stay in one place. It spreads to the arms, the back, the neck, even the jaw. That alone already changes the interpretation, because isolated pain can mean many things, but when it starts moving, it suggests something systemic. Then comes breathing, shortness of breath that doesn't match the situation. You're not exerting yourself but it feels harder to breathe. That's another layer. And then there are the less obvious signals: cold sweat, nausea, lightheadedness, a vague sense that something is wrong, even if you can't explain why. Individually, each of these symptoms can be dismissed. Together, they form a pattern, and that's the key difference. The real issue isn't that people don't feel symptoms. It's that they evaluate them in isolation. The real issue isn't missing the signs. It's not recognizing how those signs connect, because when symptoms are disconnected, they feel harmless. But when they form a pattern, they change meaning completely. That's the turning point. The real issue isn't the intensity of the symptoms. It's the interpretation of the pattern they create. Without that framework, people tend to wait for something extreme. A breaking point. A moment where it becomes undeniable. But heart attacks don't always give that moment. Sometimes, they give you a window. A period where action can change the outcome, but only if the situation is recognized early. And that's where timing matters, because the difference between acting early and acting late isn't small. It determines how much damage is done and how much can be prevented. But recognizing that window requires a shift in thinking, from, is this serious enough, to, do these signals together suggest something serious? That's how people without medical training start making better decisions. They stop waiting for certainty, and start looking for patterns. That doesn't mean assuming the worst. It means understanding when the combination of signals crosses a threshold where action becomes necessary, because in these situations, doing nothing is also a decision, and often, it's the most dangerous one. If there's even a reasonable suspicion, the priority isn't to confirm, it's to respond, calling for help, acting early, creating time, because time is the one thing you can't recover later. And in many real situations, the people who respond best aren't the ones who knew everything. They're the ones who recognized enough to act. If you want a more structured way to understand these patterns, how to interpret symptoms, what combinations matter, and how to avoid hesitation in critical moments, there's a practical guide linked in the description that breaks this down step by step. You can also subscribe if you want more videos focused on understanding these situations clearly, instead of second-guessing them when it matters most, because when you understand the pattern, you don't need perfect certainty to make the right move.